Hello, everyone. Hey, thanks. Thank you so much for coming. We're so glad to see you here. And we got an exciting program today. And we have a delicious food demonstration, plant-based, but very tasty and delicious. And Sue Potter here is going to get ready to make this cooking demonstration, so you can reproduce this at home. And this is one of her favorites, and that's why we got her especially to agree to make this presentation. So we're looking forward to it. So I am going to turn this over to Sue, but first I'm going to say a blessing. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you very much for all you do for us. Thank you for looking after us. Please give travel mercies to everyone who's here, and also people that are coming. And also, please make this have an impact on our health and our well-being, so we can be more comfortable and more healthy and more fit. We thank you for everything you do for us. Please bless the food before us. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. Hello. You all made it out. It's kind of chilly out there. Tonight, I'm going to make a couple of different things. First of all, I'm going to start with a Spanish rice recipe. I don't know about you guys, but I'm all about easy. And I like cooking with just a few items and yet still tasty. So this Spanish rice recipe I found and adapted it a little bit, and it has just turned out wonderful. You can do this on the stovetop if you don't have a rice cooker, but I'm lazy. I like the rice cooker, and it works just as well. So we're going to start with a cup and a half of rice, and you know, on your rice, the ratio is a 1-to-2 ratio. So we're going to start with a cup and a half of rice, and then it should be 3 cups of liquid. So part of that liquid is going to be your salsa. So 2 cups of water, and then just a cup of the salsa. Put it all together. You don't have to do anything special. And if you are so inclined, you can make your salsa from scratch. But like I said, I'm all about easy. And I found a salsa. One thing you want to do, if you're not doing it already, is start reading labels. It's going to make your grocery shopping a little bit longer, but you'll be better off in the long run. And trying to find items that don't have sugar, a lot of salt, a lot of oil, any of those things, you're going to have to start hunting. So this one that I found, it's a picante, and I use that for the Spanish rice recipe that I have. Just put it in, stir it up, mix it up, close the lid, and forget about it until it's done. And tonight we'll give you a sample of it and see what you think. The next thing I'm going to make is the pico de gallo salad. I call it a salad, but it's really a salsa. If you go to these Mexican food places, you'll see the pico de gallo salad or salsa. But I like to use it as a salad. I use the cabbage, and you shred that up. This recipe calls for a whole head. Now, it depends on the head. I just found a head of lettuce, and I bought 2 of them thinking, there'll be a lot of people here and we won't get much. 1 head of lettuce or cabbage was about this big, and I think I got 10 cups out of that. I've got cabbage everywhere. So on your head of cabbage, make sure it's small enough for just you. Otherwise, you'll be bringing it to fellowship meals and the homeless and everywhere else. So you're going to want to shred your cabbage. It's going to be, just small shreds. And if you want it even smaller than that, then you'll have to just kind of chop it with your knife. These tomatoes are the Roma tomatoes, and I use the Roma because they're firmer and meatier, and when you try and cut them, they don't turn into juice. So the Roma tomatoes, I used 4 of those in this salad, and you're going to, I use the green onions. You can use the red onions. This recipe calls for the red onions. You can use either one. I use the green today, and the sample that you'll get has the green. Cilantro, my favorite. 2 bunches it calls for. And that's a lot of cilantro. But oh, does it taste good. If you don't like cilantro, you of course won't be putting 2 bunches in. And then the last item is the jalapeno. This is you never know what you're getting on these peppers. I made a salad yesterday, and I used 1/2 of a jalapeno. I tasted it. It was like eating a bell pepper. It was just wonderful. So I thought, well, great. I bought 2 more, and I thought, well, for the salad today, and I thought I better try these. It took about 20 minutes for my lips to stop burning. So be very careful with these. I'm only going to put a tablespoon in, and I don't think that's even 1/2 of a jalapeno pepper. Now, if you're real gutsy, you'll want to use the Serrano, or I don't know what the other ones are that are hotter than that. But so this is your salad. I put it in a glass bowl so you could see the coloring. Makes a great Christmas salad. This dressing is, all it is lime and garlic. I'm using about 1/2 cup of lime and fresh squeezed lime. Just pour that over, and that is your salad. Mix it all up, and this does not have any oil in it, so it's very fresh tasting. You can adapt it any way you want. If you like more tomatoes, put more in, less of the onion or whatever. It's very flexible. It's a very fresh tasting salad, great in the summertime. Tonight you're going to have this we're going to give you a sample. It'll be on the little street taco tortillas. And of course you can add this to any of your tacos or enchiladas or whatever as a side dish. So any questions? Pretty easy. I think the hardest part of this salad is chopping. That's the hardest part. Okay, so I think they'll bring out the samples. And I normally use brown rice, and I don't know if you know how to dextrinize your rice. Very simple. I use a non-stick pan, and take your brown rice, small amounts, put it on your stove, and then what you're doing is toasting it, basically. And what that does is release the flavor of the brown rice, and it makes it very nutty and cooks faster and makes it very good. So when? Yeah, just a medium temperature, just until, and you will see the brown rice will start popping. And you have to stir it constantly and it's dry. You don't have any oil or anything. And it'll start popping like popcorn. and then you know it's done. And then just put it in your crock pot, add your fluid, and you're good to go. Makes a very good brown rice. Tonight I didn't use brown rice, I used the white rice just for the quickness of it. I didn't want to have to do the dextrinizing. So.
Hey Sue, what is dextrinizing?
It's just heating up it's kind of like a pre-cooking of the brown rice. And it releases a lot of the flavor in the brown rice. So it's almost like a little tiny popcorn when you're browning it. But you have to watch it closely or it'll burn. So.
Do you use long grain or short grain rice, or does it matter?
On this rice tonight, it was just long grain, I think. I don't think it really matters. It's just whatever your preference is. I normally use basmati when I make the white rice. I'll use basmati rice or the brown rice. And the salsa, you can add more salsa if you like it, more salsa-y, I don't know if that's a word, but, and reduce the water, but use more salsa.
And what's your pre-made or store-bought salsa? What's your favorite?
This is just a kind of a generic, there isn't, some of the salsas are fancy, chunky and all that, but this is just a mild tomatoey salsa. This is a picante. I think I got it at Walmart or at Costco, but it is, there's no fat in it and no sugar, nothing added to it, so it's basically.
I'd say that's a pretty good choice.
Yeah.
No added fat, no added sugars.
Well, and it's quick. You just open the bottle and pour it in. Otherwise, I have great respect for those of you who make your own salsa, stand there all day long, and great respect. Is it spicy enough for? Very tasty. Good. Okay. That's all I got.
Any other questions? Or I think we have more food, so
yeah,
people can go back for seconds.
Yeah.
I think I want to thank Sue for getting this off the ground, this cooking demonstration. It's a healthy demonstration, and it's very tasty. So thank you. Let's give her a hand. Arjo, I got it. Looks like it's working. Hey, again, thank you everybody for coming. Today's topic is on strokes and high blood pressure. And so I think this is a really important talk. But before I start on that one, I'm just going to talk about the topic from last time. The last time that we gave the talk was last month. And it was on heart disease and cholesterol. And I'm going to just be really quick on this, but this title talks about it. It says, Reversing Heart Disease, and through lifestyle changes. And I know we talked about it, but I just thought this was such an important study and such an important article, because what they did was, they found out that people, when they change their diet and their lifestyle and what they eat, it actually reverses heart disease. And they had proof of it because they had two groups of people that were in the study. One group just ate what they wanted to eat, no exercise, didn't change their lifestyle. And the second group, they did change their lifestyle, but what they did was they gave both groups, they had them go through a cardiac cath, which means that they actually went and injected dye into the heart and looked at where the clots were, or the blockage was. And they found that 6 years later, after changing the lifestyle, 6 years later, the people that had the clots and they had changed their lifestyle, changed what they ate, and had started exercising, the plugs or the blockage had reversed itself. So they were able to actually convince somebody that was a part of the study to submit to a second cardiac cath. So basically they had the first one at time 0, and then they had one 6 years later, and it showed that it had reversed around. And the people that didn't reverse their lifestyle or didn't try to exercise, didn't change their diet, when they recathed them, all their blockages even got worse. So that was such an important study. And I don't know if they can ever reproduce it again, to be able to convince somebody to go and have the cardiac cath for a second time. Because most people would probably say, no, I don't want to do that, I feel fine. But so that's an important study. And also the group that didn't change their lifestyle had more heart attacks and more problems with their heart. So this was in what we call JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, in 1998. That was such a big study. That guy who initiated that study and was able to do it was down in California at UCLA. And I thought it was such an important study that we should all know about. So I'm advocating changing your lifestyle. Watch what you're eating, exercising, don't smoke, don't do things that will make you unhealthy. This next study, and I think everybody probably remember this one, was they wanted to find out if you change your lifestyle and ate a vegan diet, and try to exercise more, could you actually reverse your cholesterol and become less diabetic? And so basically it was done at Stanford University, and they had identical twins. So it just couldn't be regular twins, but identical twins. This study came out in 2023 in November. It was also in JAMA. They had one group of twins. They just randomly assigned it. By the way, they both lived in the same household. In other words, they lived in the same household. They could have the same environment, basically. So one set of twins ate a vegan diet. Another set of twins ate, they call it an omnivore diet, which is they could eat meat and whatever they wanted to eat. But they also had access to vegan food too. And in the end, when these twins were studied, so I can add one thing. The vegan diet included fruits, whole grains, and no sugars, and no refined starches. Refined starches are starches that are made, that have gone through the process where it's no longer a raw starch, but it's actually basically refined, processed. And the omnivores include eating chicken, fish, eggs, cheese, dairy products, and other animal source foods. And then in the time of 8 weeks, they remeasure the cholesterols, and they have specific LDLs, LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, and they also test your fasting fasting insulin, and also measure how much weight they lost. And the vegan group of the identical twins living in the same household had lowered their bad cholesterol by about 14. 14 is quite a bit for if you have bad cholesterol, because usually most people have LDL, bad cholesterol, probably somewhere in 80 or 70. If you can drop it even by 10 in 8 weeks, that's a big difference. In addition to that, they had their fasting insulin, which is a risk factor for developing diabetes, showed that they were less diabetic, less risk for becoming diabetic. Also, the vegan group also lost more weight, and it was only in 8 weeks. And like I said, this study was published just in November of this last year. And it was an important study I felt that we should remember. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Elizabeth, and she's kindly agreed to talk about blood pressure and stroke. And we're not trying to put her on the spot, but I think that she wanted to be able to relay some information also because that's our topic. And like I always wonder if I'm going to be having a stroke because my blood pressure was like in the 200s at one time, my top number. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth here.
Should I turn around?
Oh, no, it's okay. Keep going ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel weird. I'm talking to the screen.
No, you can turn around. That's okay. You want to turn around?
Yeah.
Yeah, here. Let me help you. Here. There you go. This will probably help you
Oh,
a bit.
thank you. Okay, so when I had my stroke, I was only 54 years old, and I was raising 7 kids, running 2 businesses, working 16-hour days, 6 days a week, and no time for Mama Bear. And I laugh about it now, but it was really serious. And I didn't really know about blood pressure medicine at the time, even though I was really into health, like I didn't think it was necessary. But when I had my stroke, my blood pressure was over 250 on the top and 184 on the bottom. And I blew a blood vessel in this side of my temple, and only 3% lived to tell about that stroke. So God really blessed me because all the rest of my family passed away in the 12 years after my stroke. And there was a lot of them, 26 or something like that. But anyway, so trying to run 2 businesses and working all those hours, and I meant to bring my tennis shoes that I used to wear. They were ergonomically weighted so I could get my exercise in while I was doing all the work, and you wouldn't believe what they look like. The leather on them peeled all the way around the shoe because that was the last thing I took off at night was those shoes, and then I would just fall into my waterbed because I was so exhausted. But so right before I had my stroke, I was up at 1 o'clock in the morning with my identical twin girls and my son, and we were vacuuming downstairs. We had a 3,200 square foot home and a big yard to go with it that had to be mowed, that I had to mow at the time. And so I was vacuuming, and I was leaned over, and it felt like someone had opened up my skull and was pumping gas into my head, but there was no pain, which was really weird. And I wasn't a headache person. I wasn't a ibuprofen person. You know, I didn't have those problems. But every once in a while, the blood vessels in my eyes would pop, and they'd be really bloody in my eyes, which I thought was strange. So I had the stroke that night at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a slow-acting stroke. It paralyzed this side, but it was only numb the next morning when I woke up. Because after that had happened, I told my kids, hey, it's already 1 o'clock in the morning. We got to go to bed because we got to get up, and I got to work tomorrow. Same routine over and over again. So So I got up, numb leg, arm. I didn't notice my face was drooping a little bit. And still today, I notice my eye kind of droops a little bit more on this side. So my neighbors, this is weird, my neighbors came over the next morning and they noticed that something was wrong with me, but I worked all day. I worked all day. And they came over and they said, hey, something doesn't seem right. And they said that they didn't know why they felt like they should come over, but they were Christians. And so they came over, and it was the son and daughter of the people that owned the house next door. And then the following day, they brought the parents back. And I was still working the second day, but I had a dead arm and a dead leg by then because it finally took the full effect. So they said, they looked right at me and they said, we know you had a stroke. And if you don't call your daughter, Kendra, and have her pick you up and take you to the hospital, we're calling the ambulance. And they knew me. I was the road runner, and I wasn't going to stop. So I called my daughter. She took me to the hospital. They said, you're staying in here for 9 days. And I said, no, I have to get back and take care of my kids. And they said, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to have to worry about taking care of your kids. And that was at Cadillac. So they put me on blood pressure medicine. They told me all the stuff about the stroke. And I kept begging that they'd let me out of the hospital, and it had only been a couple days. And they said, when you can climb that flight of stairs, and they took me out there and they showed me, because I was on the critical floor, whatever that's called. And they said, when you can climb up that flight of stairs, and it was long. I have never seen stairs like that. So they said, when you can climb up there, we're going to let you go home. And fortunately, my neighbors brought in meals for 2 weeks, and they were elaborate. So they fed all my kids there. And after 9 days, I pulled myself up those stairs because I was determined to go home and be with my family. So, and they put me on this stuff called Agrinox, and it, I don't know if Gordon knows anything about that, but it gets rid of the stuff in your arteries and works on your blood pressure too. It was a double deal. Wow. And then they put me on this blood pressure medicine, and they told me, don't quit taking this, because I didn't know I had high blood pressure because I was too busy taking care of my family. I also, I had my exercise equipment in the living room, and I exercised every day. I only weighed 119 pounds at 54. I was still doing gymnastics, martial arts for 20 years, doing flips in the backyard at 54. But I didn't know I had high blood pressure, and that's what's weird. I mean, who would think me, 119 pounds, good blood work? My blood work was great. And you know, then have a stroke and be paralyzed. So anyway, I had that stroke. I was determined. Maybe you can call it hard-headedness. I was determined I was going to keep walking. So I would drag my leg, and I didn't have a cane at that time. but I would drag my leg. I'd have to drag it in the shower and all that stuff. And I felt weird because I wasn't worried. It's like everything hit a brick wall. And I was never sad. I was never depressed. But before that, this is a point before that, before I had my stroke, I ate shrimp, I ate pork, I ate ground beef, roast beef, I ate every kind of bad stuff that you could imagine. And I didn't find out until 2018, right after my left hip replacement. I found out, the Adventist channel came on. Can you imagine that? We only had an antenna. And the Joel Osteen went off and the Adventist channels came on. I got all my health classes every day, all day long. So it was really, what do you call it? It was a journey to get back to being healthy, to quit eating all the pork. It just makes me want to throw up when I think about it, because it's got all those toxins and stuff, and it goes into your bloodstream. And there's a program called Made for Health by Reese Rafferty, and I have the link. I actually sent it to Dr. Gordon, and they have a whole series, 13 episodes. And it's done from doctors, and then Reese Rafferty is a nutritionist and an RN. And, but what else would you like me to say?
No, that was very good. Thank you for being so candid and sharing this, because this information is really helpful. And hopefully it will help other people. I know it will.
Yeah.
So they won't have the same thing happen, or at least forewarn them
Yeah.
about this. Does anybody have any questions or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, change the diet of my children. I want to take a whip to my twin daughters because they keep eating the pork, the ham, and the bacon. And I keep telling them, and now they're starting to have digestive issues. But my son totally went off all that stuff. So.
Sharon, you got something over there?
It's called Made for Health, and it's with Reese Rafferty, and it's on the 3ABN. You can go on to 3ABN Plus on the internet, or he could send you the link, and then you could find it after that, and it's free. Yeah, you don't have to pay. You're welcome.
All right. I'm going to add one thing on this thing too. I had blood pressures around, it was 200 over 180. I had the same thing. I was also working because I had left the Army. I was single, so nobody really cared. And my mom was doing fine without me. I mean, she was taking care of herself. And I was working probably about 100 hours a week. It wasn't trying to earn all that money, but it was just people needed the trauma. There was a lot of trauma coming through Cadillac. And so I was doing all the trauma call. I was taking care of all these injuries and amputations and stuff. They all needed it. Man. And so, yeah, but I got it under control. But for I'd say about 6 years, it was in the 200 range. It was one day I just measured my blood pressure. It was just too high. The doctor said I was going to die young. So anyway.
Yeah, and you can reverse all that?
Yes, I'm down. I figure I'm down to, if I sit down, I'm going to explain how to measure blood pressure, but I'm down to like 122.
Yeah,
the
good
top
for
number,
you.
the systolic. But it was up in the 200 range.
Yeah.
And I was also diabetic too. I still am, but. better.
Well, and see, my blood work comes back great.
I'm glad.
No
Yeah.
high cholesterol or none of that. But you saw when I came in, I had a bloody nose
Yeah.
because it's my release valve, so I won't have a heart attack.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah. Thank you again. All right, so we're going to go forward here. Okay, I don't want to bore everyone, but high blood pressure is like the number one risk factor. And this is from the Global Burden of Disease Study. High blood pressure kills people. And it's also usually called a silent killer. You don't know you have it. And even if you know you have it, a lot of times you don't have any symptoms, meaning you don't feel any worse or better. Yeah. And so if you have high blood pressure, you don't feel like you're any stronger, but you don't feel any weaker. And so that's why it's called the silent killer. And it's the single most significant risk factor for deaths from aneurysms, heart attacks, heart failure, and kidney failure and stroke. So aneurysm is a weakness in the blood vessel in your brain because the blood pressure has been so high. It's just better to have a lower blood pressure because, if you have a high blood pressure, it means that motor is running all the time. The motor is pumping all the time very hard. So when I had a blood pressure of 200, it was really hard. The motor was running all the time. And it's probably true because I think what they call the sympathetic system was running all the time, the fight or flight system. So the pressure on the pipes is really high. It's better to have a low blood pressure. It's like my wife has incredibly low blood pressure. She's never high. It's like she's under 100. So I love that. I wish I had that. And kidney failure. My mom has kidney failure. That's why my mom was on dialysis. She was on it for about 3 years. And it's the blood pressure. She didn't have diabetes. Diabetes is the other issue. So it's really important to control your blood pressure. So 1 in 3 Americans have high blood pressure, and 30% of the adults in the U.S. are unaware they have high blood pressure. And apparently, high blood pressure is, it's the most modifiable thing for risk factor for death. So in other words, you can change it. I'll explain. I got my blood pressure down, and so you can get yours down because it wasn't that hard. But it's a leading cause of death in North America, and the strokes, which is related to high blood pressure, third leading cause of death, causes heart failure, end-stage renal disease. That's what my mom had because her blood pressure was in the 190 over 150. And you know what normal is. It's around 120 over 80, somewhere there. And it also causes vision loss and dementia. I don't know if that's what's causing me sometimes not to be actually as sharp as I used to be, but that could be. So if you lower your blood pressure, you'll do better. Okay, so there's some effects of high blood pressure on the body. That includes depression, vision of loss of vision, kidney disease, and sexual problems. I'm not going to go into that one, but and if you have high blood pressure, you're 3 times more likely to have a heart attack, 5 times more likely to have heart failure, and I think that's where my mom was. Her heart was starting to fail, and 8 times more likely to have a stroke. That's 8 times more likely you're going to have a stroke if you have high blood pressure, and you don't even know it. The goal of treatment of high blood pressure is to lower the blood pressure so you can protect what they call the in organs. The in organs are the things like your brain, your heart, your kidneys. You're trying to protect it by lowering the blood pressure. Don't let the pump be running so high all the time. And in addition to that, if you reduce your blood pressure, there's a reduction in the risk of stroke, reduction in risk for heart attacks and heart failures. I have some numbers there, but I'm just telling you that if you lower your blood pressure, you have less risk for a heart attack, stroke, or heart failure.
And my adrenals stuck on for
Yes, I know.
Stuck on for 3 months, but that was only a couple of years ago. It was when I had to go through all those surgeries.
Yeah. So it means the adrenal glands get the epinephrine. This is what gives you that ability to go up and do either fight or you're going to run away. And I think I also had that too, because I was constantly on, and particularly in the military. I was with all kinds of units that always were on. You got to be ready. And so reducing your blood pressure by 12 to 13 millimeters of mercury. So let me give you an example. If you were 142 blood pressure, top number, if you reduced it down to 130, you have like a 37% reduction in risk of stroke and a 21% reduction in coronary artery disease. So just a small change in blood pressure can make a difference in your heart attack risk, your stroke risk, and everything. And I'll explain to you how you can do this. Okay, so when you measure your blood pressure, there's two ways to measure. There's two numbers: the systolic, which is the top number, the high number, and that's when the heart is pumping, and it's measured in millimeters of mercury. And the diastolic number, which is the bottom number, is the lower number, and that's when the heart is relaxed. So there's the systolic and the diastolic. Now, they pay attention to both, but a lot of times we're just quoting the systolic because that's the top number, and it gives you a better idea of what's going on. But you do need both numbers. And so when you measure your blood pressure, and they make a big deal of it, because I just saw an article on, it came out from the American College of Cardiology. They actually put article on how to measure your blood pressure. So you should be sitting upright on the chair. Your arms should be at the level, like the table, same level as your heart, so you get accurate measurements. Let me say this, for my wife Becky, it doesn't matter. Her numbers are so low, it doesn't matter. But for me, it does. So I always follow it, and I'm trying to be consistent every time I measure it, so I don't get a different number every time I do it, because either my arms are down and my arms are too high or something like that. So, and you relax your hand, don't be tensed. And basically the cuff should be at the same level with the heart, and your feet should be flat on the floor. There's so many these diagrams that are in the on the web talking about how you should take what you should be doing when you take the blood pressure. So now I'll just read this back to you. So you should take your blood pressure at home. They don't like it when you take the blood pressure and rely on it from the doctor's office, because those numbers means they call it the white coat syndrome.
I've had that.
Yeah, I've had that. Okay, so it means that you're nervous and your blood pressure will be high. For somebody that has a fight and flight syndrome kind of thing, easily, like me, that I'm going to have a higher number if I don't sit there and almost meditate before they take my blood pressure. And you sit comfortable for 5 minutes in chair before you do it. Empty your bladder. They actually put that down. No caffeine, no physical activities for 30 minutes prior. And the blood pressure cuff, I'm going to also pop one over from over here. Yeah, I think I'll take this, only this one. I know I can take it right here. The blood pressure cuff from here, they actually studied this. They actually had an article on this. They actually took the time. So the bladder width, the width of the bladder this is the part, you can tell it's hard. This is the part that inflates. The width is this. Should be about 40% of the arm circumference. And they do actually measure it. Most of the time, this cuff will do it. They actually did a study on that too. They said about 70% of the time, this cuff will do it, because it's a medium-sized cuff. And also the length of the cuff, inflatable bladder, which is this whole length right here, not the soft part, but this inflatable part should be 80 to 100% of your circumference of the arm. And if you can't remember all that, I think I had it. It's in the web. It's like everywhere. It's trying to explain this. In addition to that, let's see. Oh, one more thing. Only reason I had that diagram there, the far right arm there, it shows where the brachial artery is. And so the brachial artery is right here. The artery is right here. I think God protected it. So in case you got in a fight, in a knife fight, it's protected way in here. So this is where the measuring device should be centered over, not over here, because the artery is right here. This is where they're measuring it from. So it's right here on the medial side. So, and if you have too large a cuff, it gives you a falsely lower reading. Too small of a cuff, falsely high reading. And again, my wife wouldn't even care because her numbers are just always going to be great. For me, it does make a difference. But what I try to do is be consistent. I'm going to use the same one, but that's the one I'm going to use. And it should be at heart level, your back supported so you relax, your feet are on the floor, and you record the blood pressure. And when you record the blood pressure, I try to write it down on, well, I do write it down in a notebook. If you write it down in a notebook, you can have a record. You put the date and the time, and if you want to, you can put down the circumstances like, oh, I just went on a run, or it was a bad day, or something, you know, so that you'll have an idea, have some way to track this back, you know, a year from now. So record those numbers. It's worth it to have a little notebook. And also the other thing is, if you go see a doctor, he measures your pressure in the office, that number may not be usable. And it's better to have numbers that came from when you were relaxed, hopefully, at home. That's where you got it from. And to put those numbers down, and then he can look at it. Otherwise, he or she doesn't have anything to work on, except for that one number he got from you in the office. And maybe some records you have. So I record it down on a little notebook, spiral notebook. Okay. And there's, on hypertension, this is probably not as important, but they call it primary hypertension or essential hypertension. And that's high blood pressure that they really don't know exactly the reason why you have it, but you do have it. So it's primary or essential hypertension. And the secondary causes are like adrenal issues. Secondary means they can actually track it down to figure out exactly what's causing it. And again, this little slide again, there's a ton of slides like that. It is a silent killer. You don't even know you're being infected by it. So it's good to check it. Like I didn't know until I was really high until I was in my mid-50s. Okay, this is a chart right here on the blood pressure. I'm going to move away from here, but there it is again. So normal blood pressure is around 120 or over 80 and below. And they have elevated blood pressure, 120 over 129 over 80. And that's probably where I am right now. Just is better than 200. And then you have high blood pressure stage 1 and 2. And the highest of stage 2 is 140 over 90 or above. So that's kind of high. Sometimes I get that number too. Depends on the day. And a hypertensive crisis is when you have a blood pressure of 180 over 120 or even higher. And I hope nobody gets that. That's why you gotta get this under control, because those are really high numbers. They'll actually act on that if you went to an emergency room or think about doing that. And so the American College of Cardiology also came up with their numbers. Their numbers are really close, so I'm not going to even go over this. Basically, you have an idea. I left that chart on page 1 that has that for you. So just give you a quick reference, give you at least one source. This is the American College of Cardiology. So all the cardiologists, usually when they pass all their tests, can have an option of joining them. And they came with an idea of this. Okay, I'm just going to say one thing. In Kenya, they eat a lot of plant-based foods. They don't hardly have any money for meat, and their blood pressure is mostly normal. And in China, at one time, that was true too. They had the average Chinese blood pressure is 110/70. They too didn't have the money to buy meat, and they're mostly vegetarian. Okay, so what kind of foods to avoid? And let me put it this way. If you talk to a cardiologist, if they said you have high blood pressure, the first thing they're going to tell you is not exactly take blood pressure medicine, but to exclude the salt or minimize the amount of salt. It's funny, that's about the number one thing, and I'll show you a diagram that they put out that said, hey, get that salt out, kick that salt out of there. And so they think that the most of the sodium in the American diet comes from packaged processed foods. It's not what you actually add in the kitchen. So in other words, when you buy the processed food, it has the salt already added. And you should avoid deli and lunch meats, which are also often packed with sodium, salt. And also when they cure it and they process it, they have to add salt. I mean, that's just part of the process. And they also, like a bologna sandwich usually has 190 milligrams or 900 milligrams of sodium, and a hot dog 567. Well, the recommended amount of sodium per day for an American that's maybe having a blood pressure issue, which is usually older people, is 1,500. 1,500. If you can kind of remember that number, 1,500. So you eat a slice of bologna, you already got 500 of it. And so you have to be really careful. And a pepperoni pizza, which I love, haven't had one for a long time. A 12-inch pepperoni pizza has 3,100 milligrams of sodium. Yeah. Now, if you're healthy, they say you can get about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So basically, probably the best thing to do is make your own food. So we make our own pizza now. We don't get a processed pizza. I mean, I like pizza. Maybe if we were in an emergency, or not an emergency, but you're traveling or something, you're kind of stuck. You have to eat something that's not processed. And this is the cardiologists think this is the most single thing that you can do to lower your blood pressure. There's some other things too. Okay, canned soups are high in sodium. One can of chicken and vegetable soup contains about 2,100 milligrams of sodium. So that's much higher than 1,500. So you need to cut that off. And also, sugar can increase your blood pressure. They do have a study that shows that high blood pressure, by decreasing the sugar by 3 teaspoons a day, resulted in about 8 millimeter drop in the blood pressure, the top number. So just cutting back on sugar can help you lower your blood pressure.
Eat figs.
Figs, yeah.
Costco has them for $8.99 a big bag.
Yeah.
Figs are really good.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, natural foods are better.
Yeah.
Yes, they have sugar, but the other thing, they have phytoproteins, they have other things that are more healthier for you, rather than you just eating a sugar cube of sugar. It's better that way, just so you have something natural that has other nutrition and vitamins with you. Yeah. So the American Heart Association recommends a diet that's low in sodium, high in potassium, that promotes the consumption of fruit, vegetables, and increasing physical activity and losing weight. So there's the American Heart Association has come out and said, yeah, you need to lower your sodium, eat foods that have high potassium. And I'll explain the high potassium one, because I was kind of suspicious when I saw, what do you want us to do, take more potassium? But no, there's a reason. And then eat more fruit and vegetables and increase your physical activity. And that's from the American Heart Association, which doesn't have any bias or anything. They just want you to not die from a stroke or heart attack. And they claim that 90% of the American eats too much sodium, and most of it comes from processed food and restaurant food, foods that have already been made, not made by you, but made by somebody else who's trying to make it appetizing for everybody. And again, who said we need to read food labels?
UKA. You can scan every barcode
That's right.
It will tell you if there's risky additives in it, and I use it on everything when I go into Costco.
Yeah, that's a good one. So it's an app, so we can look at it. So this one right here, very top, I can't even hardly see it. Sodium is 540 milligrams. So what it means is that's 27% of your, 1/3 of it. So they're going with 1,500 is the key number. And so in whatever this product was, I think it was a meat or something, has already 1/3 of the sodium that is already in that one serving that you have. In addition to that, it has saturated fats, which you learned from last time is not good for you. They're usually associated with meats. So reading food labels makes a difference. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about this diet here. There's called a DASH diet. Has anybody heard of it? DASH diet? Yep, there's some DASH diets. Okay. So the DASH diet was, it is recommended by the American College of Cardiology. And it talks about eating vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fish, poultry, and nuts and beans, and high potassium foods, and avoiding sugary drinks, getting rid of fats, and keep dairy products at a minimum. Now it does say you can eat poultry and fish, but I'm just saying, you know, most of us don't eat. Most of us are vegan and vegetarian. But this DASH diet is, I want to make sure, to be fair, it is in a lot of the literature put out by the cardiologists, by the American College of Cardiology. It's allowing for this. I think if they had too strict of a diet, it'd be very, very difficult to follow. And because then people would say, well, I can't do this. I can't do it. It's called DASH. It stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And other treatments include dropping the amount of sodium you take, and getting regular aerobic exercises, like 30 minutes a day, several days a week. That's a DASH diet. Okay, so this was an interesting one. So this is from the Joint National Committee on Prevention, Detection, Evaluation, and Treatment of High Blood Pressure. That's a lot of words. And it's JNC7. So this is the 7th time they met. They wanted to lower blood pressure and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, which is stroke and heart attacks. And what they recommended was you had to do a lifestyle modification. So the first one was weight loss, and it would reduce your blood pressure anywhere from 5 to 20 millimeters of mercury, the systolic. So if you're able to reduce your blood pressure by 20, when I get a 140, if I reduce it down to 120, I'll be pretty good. So weight loss helps. The other one is limit alcohol intake to no more than 1 ounce in women or men, and 0.5 ounces in women. So I noticed when they write in this article, there's a lot of people that drink. I know we don't drink hardly. I know I don't drink, but I mean, as our church, we just don't drink. But there must be enough drinkers out there. They actually put this port into the recommendations. And by eliminating alcohol or limiting it, you can drop your blood pressure by 2 to 4 millimeters. And it says reduce sodium intake to no more than 2,400. Now, remember I said earlier 1,500. So they were being kind here, the 2,400, because they figure nobody would be able to follow up on it. And it reduces blood pressure almost up to 8 millimeters of mercury. And that's a big difference, particularly if you're borderline of being hypertensive and normaltensive, meaning that even as you've dropped 8, you could be lower. And then engage in aerobic exercise at least 30 minutes daily for at least 7 days a week, and they can reduce 4 to 9 millimeters of mercury. So exercise and reducing sodium, don't drink alcohol or cut it back as much as you can. And it is a poison, as Elizabeth saying. Now, there's so it says a few things about high blood pressure. High blood pressure is uncommon in 80% of the world. Americans, on average, consume too much salt, and if you could lower your blood pressure, lower your amount of your blood pressure by reducing your salt intake, you could do this solely by just reducing your salt. And that's really what this slide says. So lower your blood pressure primarily by reducing salt intake. So this chart right here, which I can barely read, is on your thing. It's chart number 2 on here. Number 2, you can flip it open. You don't have to.
Have another paper of that?
Oh yeah, right here.
Oh,
Yeah, here, Elizabeth, it's all right.
it's okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this came from the American College of Cardiology, okay? And it says guidelines made simple. They made those guidelines simple for you to understand. And it's prevention, detection, evaluation, management, high blood pressure in adults. And look at the title, best proven non-pharmacological, meaning not with drugs, interventions for prevention and treatment of high blood pressure. So these are the best proven, and this is what the Cardiologist Academy says is the best way to do it. And so number 1 is weight loss. Number 2 on here is healthy diet. And with the healthy diet, it says you can lose 11 millimeters of mercury. You see to the right. So a healthy diet makes a big difference. It says reduce intake of dietary sodium. That'll lose you anywhere 5 to 6 millimeters of mercury. In other words, it can drop your blood pressure. And enhance intake of dietary potassium. This is the first time I heard about potassium, but they're recommending potassium. Not potassium you take as a chemical, but in the foods. There's foods that have potassium in it. And pistachios, there will be a lot of other foods that have it, and you can lose about 5 millimeters. Physical activities such as aerobic, resistance exercises, can you see that? And you can lower also your blood pressure. And moderation in alcohol intake. I think it's again because there are so many people that drink. They had to put that in there to tell them, hey, cut back on your alcohol. So this is, Cardiologist Academy is saying this is the best way to do it if you're not going to take drugs, and they've been proven to work. Okay. So for potassium, this slide has potatoes, tomato paste, white beans, yogurt, sweet potato, bananas, spinach, all have potassium in it. I'm not saying gorge out on potassium foods, but these are natural foods that you can take. Now, obviously, if you have a kidney problem like my mom did, you can't take that much because your kidneys are not clearing that potassium now. But the cardiologists are recommending this to enhance lowering your blood pressure. And this chart you can find on the web. Okay, they also talk about lowering the amount of fats that you're taking in, and particularly don't take trans fats because those are artificial fats. I say artificial fats to help preserve the food, so increase the packaged food shelf life and stability. And also reduce foods that you have saturated fats, and saturated fats are primarily animal product item. So animal product fats are usually saturated. And now we're going to talk about strokes. So stroke involves, is considered a part of the cardiovascular disease, and either a blood vessel burst or a clot forms, and then it makes the brain not get blood. And because it doesn't get the blood, the brain cells can't get oxygen or blood, and the brain cell starts to die. And it's also known as cerebral vascular accident, CVA. So that's why you see the CVA and stroke. And it's the number 4 cause of death among adults in the U.S., and it's the leading cause of disability in the U.S. So if you get a stroke, there's a possibility you're going to get a disability, and that disability means you can have limitations what you can do. And about 40% occurs in males and 60% in females. And they had a list of symptoms, which I'm going to go over in a second, but the list for females, there's more symptoms of a stroke than the men have. The men have a limited amount, they're like 10 symptoms, but the females have like 10 symptoms. And so one thing about it is, if you lower your blood pressure by 20 millimeters of mercury, 20 millimeters, then you can decrease the risk of a stroke and heart disease by about 50%. So I'll say that again. If you lower your blood pressure by 20 millimeters and mercury, so it'd be, if you were 140 systolic, the top number, and you dropped it to 120, you reduce your risk for heart disease or stroke by 50%. So that's what, well, obviously I dropped it from 200 down to 120. And the Heart Association recommends for reducing risk of stroke is bring your sodium intake down to about 1,500. Okay, and if you get a stroke, it's the number one cause of long-term disability. It's 24% of the strokes lead to death. 50 to 70% of stroke victims will improve or have a mild disability. So 50 to 70% of those people who have a stroke will improve or just have only a mild disability. So disability like maybe some weakness or it might be a numb area. 15 to 30% of them, which is 3 out of 10, will have a permanent disability if you get a stroke. And 20% will require, 20% of those people will require custodial care. Meaning you're going to have somebody help you if you get a stroke, and at least about 3 months of custodial care. And there's two types of strokes. I'm just kind of bringing it up: ischemic and hemorrhagic. I'm going to talk about ischemic. Means the thing is narrowing down, the blood vessel is narrowing, and a blood clot forms and flies off and blocks it, and there's no blood supply to that area. So, like I know for a fact that I have what I call plaques or blockage, and it's not 100% blockage, it's like 40%, is in my right carotid, and I have some in my brain. So I'm at risk for having an ischemic one. If that little narrowed thing blocks off because some piece of calcium flies off or a plaque flies off, it'll block it 100% or block it 80%. You have reduced blood flow, and something needs to be done. Hemorrhagic means the blood pressure is so high, so high, like in the 200 or 250, then it'll rupture. The water pipe broke, and the water is now leaking. It doesn't get to where it needs to go to supply the blood or the water supply. So ischemic means lack of blood, ischemia, and hemorrhagic means it ruptures the blood vessel. And then finally, there's the transient ischemic attack, TIAs, or a mini stroke. TIAs, transient ischemic episode or event. So TIA means that there's a mini stroke. It only lasts a short period of time. But usually it forewarns you that there's going to be a big event coming. So that's why when you get a warning one, hey, you better start taking medications to reduce the risk of a future blood clot. So TIA, transient ischemic attack. Okay, just going to bring this up real quick. So women's risk for stroke. It says 1 in 5 women will have a stroke. And strokes kill more women than twice as many women as women from breast cancer. So in other words, if there's more risk that you're going to die from a stroke if you're a woman than you would be dying from breast cancer. So breast cancer or stroke risk increases with age because women live longer than men, and largely 6 in 10 people who die from a stroke are women. Over half. And the risk of stroke doubles at midlife and roughly doubles during the 5 years after menopause. Stroke risk increases during pregnancy. I used to deliver babies, and we were always looking for this thing called preeclampsia, where the blood pressure is too high. Because it hurts them and hurts the woman and it hurts the baby. It's scary, actually. And if you take birth control pills, it may double your risk of stroke. So when I used to do surgery for knees, scopes, I got a young person, you think they're going to do fine, which they do. They usually always do fine. But if they're taking birth control pills, there's always a risk for a small clot forming somewhere. And it'll travel to the brain or something like that. And high blood pressure is a major risk factor for stroke. 1 in 3 women have high blood pressure.
And they don't know it.
They don't know it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And again, ischemic strokes, and that's the one, the most common. It's 87% of strokes are ischemic, and hemorrhagic is only like 13%. So the most common is the one where you have a clot flies off somewhere, and then it flies into the brain, and it blocks off a major vessel. Okay, and hemorrhagic is only 13%. So there's a weakened vessel. So the vessel, usually when it turns a corner or something, the material is weakened because the blood pressure has been so high, and then it ruptures. And it allows bleeding into the brain. And then the blood is accumulating in the brain area, and it's putting pressure on the brain. It's like if I do irrigation piping, and then there was a rupture and there was water everywhere, the blood everywhere, and it's putting pressure on everything. Okay, stroke prevention. How can we prevent it? Okay, stroke prevention, you monitor and keep your blood pressure normal. Monitor keeps a record if you really think you have a trouble. So because I have a trouble, I'm keeping a record. My wife doesn't even bother to write it down. Check your cholesterol level because that puts you at risk. Irregular heartbeat should be treated, such as atrial fibrillation. So atrial fibrillation is when the atrium, there's 2 atriums and 2 ventricles. The atrium feeds into the ventricle. But anyway, the atrium, it fibrillates. It just does like this. You ever see it? It doesn't squeeze the blood. It goes like this. And so it's inefficient. But what happens is the blood settles in that area, in that little chamber, the atrium, and then it forms a clot in there. And that little clot will then fly off to the brain. And I've seen it in all kinds of people, and usually associated with people that have high blood pressure. And they could have, there are other disorders that cause the fibrillation and the blood clot. But this is one of them. And it's 5 times the risk for stroke, which is 500 times the risk for stroke. And so what they do is they put you on a blood thinner. So it dissolves the blood clot. So you're always on a blood thinner, meaning the blood is no longer able to clot. So if you cut yourself, it'll bleed. You won't die from the amount of bleeding, but it's just thin blood. And the other one is treat for carotid artery disease. There are 2 carotids, right carotid and left carotid. I know I have some disease in this one. Left one's clean. They just happened to run a test one time and they saw it and they mentioned it to me. There's nothing to do for it because it's not significant enough. And avoid secondhand smoke or smoking. That's bad for strokes. Maintain a healthy weight. Follow a diet low in saturated fat, cholesterol, and glucose or sugar. Limit your alcohol. Yes, a lot of people drink. That's where it's coming from. Read the food labels for sodium and cholesterol, and have an active exercise program. I mean, those are pretty simple. Reduce, watch what you're eating, exercise, watch your cholesterol and your blood, and treat all the kind of problems that you might have. Don't smoke, don't drink. Okay, 1 in 6 in the U.S. will have a stroke in their lifetime. Most strokes are preventable. That is the philosophy, actually, of the American Heart Association and the cardiologists. It's preventable. We're just not taking care of ourselves. Most strokes are preventable. You have the power to prevent strokes by controlling your blood pressure. 1 in 3 of Americans have high blood pressure. The number 1 controllable risk factor for a stroke is blood pressure. You can control your cholesterol, reduce your blood sugars, and stay active. Do activity. And I'm not going to like you're going to go running, but if you walk for 30 minutes, or even if you did an exercise bike or you did a stationary bike, it would help. Do something to do some physical activity, get the heart pumping. It says stop smoking. Stroke risk is 2 to 4 times higher among smokers. Eat better, incorporate more fruits and vegetables. Again, the cardiologist and the American Heart Association tells you eat more vegetables, eat more fruits, and reduce your sodium to less than 1,500 milligrams per day and lose weight. And this one just says there's many things that can cause strokes, and there's some hidden causes. It could be irregular heartbeat. So if you get one that you occasionally where you think your heartbeat is irregular, atrial fibs can be also constantly there, and sometimes what they call it well, anyway, it means intermittent. It comes and it goes, and you can sometimes catch it with the right studies. And long-term effects of stroke. Number one cause of long-term disability in the U.S. 34% of people hospitalized for stroke were younger than 65. There's another study that said they're younger than 55. So we need to get this under control. You'll have problems with memory, thinking process. You have a third of people have depression, and you can have inability to talk.
I had that for a while.
Yeah, they have inability to talk. I'm so glad you got it back.
Oh, my speech was twisted up.
Oh yeah, I couldn't communicate. Yeah, that's real bad. And about half of the stroke survivors are able to return back to work. 80% of the people affected by a stroke are worried about their financial future. I agree if you're not working. And many of them lose their ability to drive. And injuries from falling are common, and the most common post-stroke complication. Meaning there's a chance you can fall. And if you fall, there's a high chance you're going to break something. And if you break something, that changes the whole game plan. You can have problems with vision and trouble with sleep, difficulty with swallowing, and you can have spasms in your muscles, and you can get a foot drop. They call it a foot drop because your foot, you can't raise your toes up anymore. And so as you're dragging your toes, that's what they call foot drop, and you're more likely to trip. And 74% of stroke survivors face some kind of pain. 80% of stroke survivors experience one side of the body is paralyzed. And 70% will have fatigue. And about 46% of stroke survivors lack the ability to control their bowel or bladder. So it's basically not very good. You have a stroke. So I'm just going to talk about this really quick here. So this, I think, is really important. It's called Be Fast. It's on the page here, on page number 3, I think. There it is, page 3. You can kind of read it up here too. So Be Fast is the acronym. So B is for, this is how you can spot somebody who has stroke. This is the easiest way to do it other than getting a CAT scan. So and it talks about what you need to do. So I'm just going to have, is it, what? Brisa, can you stand up and I'll just go through it with you. Just kind of help you remember this. Okay, the first one is balance. So you can ask me to walk. Yeah. Well, okay. So so that's a lack of balance. In other words, you're getting dizzy, and so that would be a positive. The eyes, they'll have a E for Be Fast. You can ask me how many fingers you're holding up.
How many of those fingers do I have up?
You got 2, but they're going to have a vision problem, and that's another thing. And then there's a thing called facial droop, and it says that half the face will droop. So when you ask them to smile, here I'll smile. So it's symmetrical. So, but on a stroke patient, half the face will be paralyzed, and just one side, and the smile will droop down. That's another clue that this is you got a stroke in your hand. And then there's you can ask her to raise my arms up.
Raise your arms up.
Okay, raise your arm up. So what will happen is, because there's weakness on one side, one side will start dropping. They can't hold it up there. It'll start drifting down. So that's the arms. That's part of the acronym. And S is speech, like you can't talk. All right. And then what's the last part? Yeah, call 911. It's a good thing to call 911. Thank you. All right. But it's a good thing to call 911. And it does say this. It's better to call 911 even after the symptoms have gone, because there's a reason why, but I'll explain it in a second. But it's just better to call them. So even if it's a false alarm, it's better to call them. And I'll explain in a second why. And the reason why is you're going to lose brain cells during a stroke, and you'll have more permanent disability the more brain cells that die off. So I just talked about it. And for the slurring of speech, sometimes people say the sky is blue and ask them to repeat it. And okay, so in women, they have one more thing. They'll have sudden facial and limb pain, sudden shortness of breath, sudden hiccups, sudden heart palpitations, sudden chest pain, sudden nausea, sudden general weakness. And these are in women. They're unique to women, not to men. It was strange. So in other words, one is hiccups. They suddenly develop hiccups. Okay, so what you got to do is when you call somebody and say, hey, look, we have a B fast, and the person has loss of balance. The face, when you ask them to smile, it's no longer symmetrical but drooping, and that's probably good enough for them. And what they do is you go to an emergency room, and they'll give you a thing called TPA. If you qualify for it, they'll first get the CAT scan, and it's a medicine that's put in through the groin up into the brain, and it dissolves the clot. So what you do is you have a time frame you have to do it in. It's usually 1 to 3 hours, and you have to meet the standards, because that means everybody has to be moving, doing whatever they can to get that CAT scan and get ELDA studies. And they're trying to dissolve the blood clot. And also there's devices that can be slipped up through the groin that'll grab the blood clot, if it's the kind that can be grabbed. If they see it's the kind that can't be, well, then you can't do it. So what I'm trying to say is there's an emergency. There's a time frame that's going on. For ischemic clots, or not ischemic, hemorrhagic, they'll sometimes put a coil in it. So if you look way over here, they put a coil, a metal coil, in this little weakened area where it's bleeding. And they also put a little piece of some glue into it to stop the bleeding from occurring. So that's for the hemorrhagic, which is different from the ischemic. Most common is ischemic. They're going to dissolve the clot if they get to it in time, and it looks like it's the correct treatment for it. So you may get there in time, they may decide not to do it. So, in summary, high blood pressure is the single most important factor for a stroke. The only way to know your blood pressure is high is to check it regularly and know when your blood pressure should be at, and try to keep it at that level. And your blood pressure can be reduced by limiting your daily sodium. And reduction of blood pressure means reduction of stroke. Basically, this says that you've reduced your blood pressure, you reduce the risk of having a stroke. And I'm going to just mention this last slide here. Cadillac Providence Medical Center has a Joint Commission Primary Stroke Center, a state-designated Level 2 stroke center, an accredited chest pain center for emergent catheterization, meaning to put that little thing into your heart or your brain, and a state Level 1 cardiac center. Trios Hospital also has a Level 2 stroke center and a Level 1 cardiac center. At least that's what they say on their website. I know at Cadillac they do have it. They probably have a lot. Basically, you got to have somebody in 24 hours ready to go if you're going to get a stroke. And you got to have a whole team ready to go, not just the cardiologist or the neurosurgeon or whatever. Everybody has to be ready to go, because when you only got an hour to 3 hours to do something, You can't have anything slow down. Okay, so I may be talking about everything about blood pressure and strokes, but you still need to have faith and trust in God, and that's the most essential part of everything we are doing. And you got to have patience for lowering your blood pressure. It took me probably about a year to lower it down to where I feel like it's okay now, and have trust in God that it's going to work. And I'm going to just have a 1 minute moment here. Arjo? Yeah, do you want to say a few words about how to access these lectures and everything? I can probably help you feed into this too. Explain it. Oh, that's all there is. I mean, so people are asking how to access the lectures or the seminars. Yeah, live seminars.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so I just want to introduce myself first. I'm Arjel. I'm part of the audio-video team. I handle all the live stream for YouTube for us, for our church. So if there's anyone that isn't experienced with how to access YouTube via smart TV, a computer, a phone, you can always come to me and I'll walk you through the steps on how to do so. So if there's ever a time you can't make it to church or you can't make it to this, at least you'll still have the live stream and the video to watch on YouTube.
Thank you. Yeah. I was going to say that I can access YouTube on my computer, and so it's already there. As soon as I get on YouTube, I can get to the Kennewick SDA Church, and I can access virtually everything. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to close down. Does anybody have any questions? So I wanted to try to get you done by 7:30, so I'm a little bit over. I think I scared everybody. Yeah, go on ahead.